Okay. I see a lot of new faces also have joined since I speak, right? Uh, okay. So basically, we're opening up for any one of the questions, right? So you can basically fire in all the questions that you had bottled up till now, right? So yeah. So we have Sumukh, uh, we have Vikrant, we have Dibyaprakash, and myself, Vasuki Vardhan, right? We'll be taking any one of the questions that you will be having, right? So yeah, you can start if any one of you has any questions. No questions. And everything was that clear. Like you understood every single thing on what everyone spoke about. Nice. Okay. But either way, I have a few. Uh, yeah, they are handling it. Any questions on online?
No.
No. Okay. So, okay. Either ways, I have a few questions, right? To start off with, the very simple topic that we took up, right? Value objects, right? So, how deeply, I mean, are you guys using it? Right? I mean, that is something that is inherently built in a lot of these validations, right? We don't really go ahead and think through it a lot, right? JSON parse exceptions or integer parse exceptions. And this is something that we come across way too often at runtime, right? So, yeah, I mean, how deeply have you guys used building out your own value objects?
Okay. So I believe value objects inherently is there in every other dependency, and it's a very common um, framework that you see in Spring Boot or even otherwise.
Huh.
And we obviously use it a lot of times. It's what my intention here is today was primarily to tell that how important is it and how you can use it going forward as well. You don't really stick to the pojos or the DSLs, basic
Yeah,
Javas.
yeah, that makes a lot of sense, right? So, I mean, phone number is the best example, right?
Right,
We can take one in terms of validation.
right,
A lot of times when we push some data into, yeah, even though it is statically typed, strongly typed, right? Yeah, data type is being validated, but the value inside itself is not being validated. A lot
right.
of times we face these issues when in at runtime.
Yes,
Some junk value came in, data type somehow matched, it goes into the database or it gets propagated somewhere else, and
right.
we are stuck with that entire loop.
Something as simple as in India, for example, your phone number, let's say 8867141252, is same as +91 8867141252.
Exactly.
So something like this, when you try to query it, you can probably easily handle this when you are able to write a probably custom parser or within a value object. If you're able to handle this better, it makes it easier and easier for the code to understand and to read the code.
Yeah, it also creates a lot of clear abstractions, right?
Exactly.
As I said, that is also one. Jackson is one of the things, right? You need
Yes.
to register that as a module
Right.
before we do anything. Okay, cool. And coming to things on Spring security, right? Lot of things that you actually mentioned about using JWT roles and all these things, right? So, uh, what kind of a context that you were talking about in terms of Spring uses context, right? Your solid context going through the entire point, right? So, on what particular grounds where you see that Spring security could probably do a bit better? Like there might be case scenarios where you would have found that okay, this is something that I wanted, but is not available, kind of a scenario. Have you
Uh,
ever faced that?
Mhm.
Actually, it's very use case based, you can say. So suppose you are making use of this JROT authentication token for your project. So if you are making use of that and implementing Spring security for the same specific purpose, you can handle it properly. But suppose sometime happens is like suppose you don't have much clarity on the Spring security filter chains. Right now they have introduced this security filter chain. So it has multiple implementation types, right? You can have this zero T authentication, you can have this DAO based authentication, and all these things. So you have multiple options, but the very first thing is you have to choose the correct option that suits your requirement, right? So if you are able to do that, you have to figure out if you want this specific user based, like user and password based authentication, you have to go with the password based authentication. So I think the clarity on the top level where what you want to use makes you more clear about how you can implement the security in your application. So yeah, that will be my.
Because that was one such use case we had, right? That a lot of times we go ahead. A lot of times our main use case basically boiled down to OAuth 2.0 or OpenID Connect. Right? So something very simple as connecting to Okta for validation, or even Google Auth for validation. Right now with Cloud Connect, Java CFE, and we have ways to do that. That was one particular use case where we found that just Spring Security itself didn't actually do the job for us. So that was where my question was. And last but not least, coming to your case scenario, right? I mean, for me, that one particular point where you showed that there is a possibility to bring down your entire Java application down to 5. Now, that really piqued my interest, right? Now, that is something that we are talking very close to C and Rust kind of scenario, right? 5 MB, 4 MB, these are some things that we usually find in those extreme low level things, right? So, I mean, have you ever used Graal VM app to that level? Or that is something that it is still in experimentation?
Yeah. So I can say I have another use case where the image size was just 1.5 5 MB. Also, I didn't included that, but it got reduced up to 1.5 MB as well. Yeah, and I have used Graal VM. Like I have used two forms of Graal VM. One is you can directly use build specs, which comes with Spring Boot. Else you can install Graal VM in your infra first, and you can directly run the Graal VM native commands. So yeah, we can do that. And yeah, I have deployed few services using Graal VM, and the performance is really good. So I'll tell you one scenario. You don't want higher RAM architectures. Okay, you are stick to 1 GB RAM architecture. Okay, I'll just give you one example of EC2 instance. Okay, so if you are deploying your application over there, so it will use, like if it's a normal application, it will use like 400 MB or 500 MB of RAM for sure. Okay, but if you are and after that you will have no space for deploying any other application in that particular server. Okay, that's impossible. It will crash basically. So what you can do is like you can use Graal VM, and you will see the difference really really well. Okay, like you can even deploy the same type of application like 3 times, like 3 applications you can deploy in single 1 GB instance. So difference is a lot, and it's really good. But again, I'll say it has some drawbacks as well. If you have used condition on property, right? Like if this bin is not available, then inject this bin, right? So we have one understand that will not work with Graal VM because it compiles ahead of time, and it doesn't allow you to inject something in runtime. So
So,
yeah, again we
but
can define that in instruction JSON of Graal VM. Yeah,
so yeah, so basically something. I mean, the ones that I am particularly using is a combination of AOT and JIT, right? But the maximum that we have gone currently is going with distilless JDK, right? The second stage, the what you showed,
correct.
right? That is where we are at right now, right? And mostly I mean, that is a very particular use case conditional properties.
Yeah.
This is something that is probably widely used in enterprise, right?
True.
You would need to have failover scenarios. So that is where probably we are using JIT,
Correct.
Graalvm's JIT, and also this thing.
Okay,
But yeah,
okay.
definitely that the very next thing on Monday morning that I'm doing is trying out that 5 MB thing.
Yeah.
That is something that we would want to do. If we get that, then we mostly have solved a lot of our resource issues
Yeah, correct.
that we're facing right now. Right? Okay. You guys have any questions to the speakers? I think it off of your mind. All right, good.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, again, back to you guys. You guys have any questions? Yeah.
Hi, I have a question regarding GraalVM. Like, what are the specific use cases where you have used it? And since you mentioned that it's lightweight, so on what features we need to compromise on? Since you mentioned some of the features which are not present there, so what are the things which we need to compromise, and what are the limitations? That's I wanted to know.
Yeah. So in some scenarios, like there will be some like dynamic code modification. You can say like you are injecting some like other component in runtime to your application. That will be strict. Like okay, because like if you'll see like AOT does the same thing. Like it's a feature you can say with some kind of limitation. It makes one native executable package. Okay, and you don't have any entry point to push any code. Okay, so that particular feature you will miss. And as I said, like condition on property, so like you cannot direct like really determine in the runtime which bean to use. Okay, so these are like specific scenarios you can say, like this will not be like creating problems for you every time. So yeah, after considering these points you can just choose like you if you want to use JVM or GraalVM. What was your other question?
Sorry.
What was your other question?
Yeah, this one only,
Okay,
like
yeah.
limitations. Okay, thanks.
Hello. Am I audible? Hello.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I'm Sabarish. So my question is like, in the current world, like the technologies are coming up, adding a lot of features, right, and coming up with new releases very frequent. So even today's session, like we have seen a lot of new technologies, right? So my question is like, how do we seamlessly upgrade the new technology and implement? So do you have any best practice line and where we need to focus more? And for example, like Spring Security, right? He talked about new features, Spring Security 6 and GraphQL over REST API. So already I have implemented a few set of technology and running into production, right? So again, one new technology come up, and I see a lot of new features. Like I attempt to implement and upgrade those new feature into my current one. So is there any best practice? Like, do we have like so? How do we seamlessly upgrade and implement those new features?
So as you said, right, with a lot of new versions coming in, a lot of technologies coming in. Currently, we are also in the middle of one particular migration from upgrading from Spring Boot 2.7 to Spring Boot 3. Right. So one of the major shifts that we are looking at is basically upgrading a lot of runtime environments. Right. So I mean, most of the enterprise systems that you would have worked on mostly are still using Java 8, right? Oracle Java 8 because of they've already purchased licenses and all those things, right? The first thing that came into the entire point was how do we get Java 17 now? Base version change, right? Till 2.7, that wasn't a particular issue, right? Java 8, good. Okay, let's run it. Now the baseline change. How we get that? and you also know the skepticism that comes with upgrading to an entirely new runtime, licensing, if there are in licensing, all these things, right? So yeah, there are a few things which are mostly on the infrastructure side in terms of upgradation. But yeah, in terms of you talking about moving from REST to GraphQL, and that is also one migration that we did. Right? It actually on the API side, yes, it is a end consumer upgradation that needs to be done, right? Because now your REST APIs are now deprecated, available but deprecated, right? So now you will have a new set of controllers that you've written where you have exported your GraphQL endpoints, right? But transition over to here is pretty much simple. Like none of your Spring policies are being changed, right? You still have your controller, you still have your service implementations. It's just that now you have a new controller implementation, right? Or even for that case scenario, lot of times what you can already do, right? Let's say you already have a set of REST controllers defined, right? Even at on the deprecation side, you just add a new set of annotations, right? Query mappings and mutation mappings, right? Right over your get mapping, post mapping, whatever you're using, right? Even that should technically work well. It's until unless you're not going ahead and changing your entire uh, project structure entirely. I mean, that is something that probably at least we would avoid, right? We don't want to introduce new bugs onto a stable system, right? So that is something that we usually keep a track of. Right? Mostly, if we want to add a new functionality, we still keep the uh, older things. We create a new extension of the same thing, right? We try to follow the solid principles. That basically gives a base framework so that you have one kind of a best practice to follow on, right? So that solid principle already gives you this kind of extension probabilities, right? You go and create a decorator pattern that you already have an interface that is already defined for you. Now you want to upgrade something and your service implementation changes for that upgradation. You still use the same interface, but now you have a new implementation, right? On runtime with dependency inversion that Spring Boot provides, you can now inject your new implementation while keeping your old implementation untouched. Right? If something goes bad entirely, then you always have a backup to switch over. So that is something that we usually do.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I would like to add another point. So if you have migrated to like Spring Boot 3 from Spring Boot 2, you must have seen like they have changed the package names as well. Okay, like earlier it was Java X dot something if you are using JPA, and now it's Jakarta. Okay, so if you want to migrate to Spring Boot 3, you cannot directly go and change the form. Okay, you cannot just mention like Spring Boot 3 I want to use. So you have to change your entire code. Okay. So as you asked, like what is the like approach we should follow? Okay, so we can like divide the components, like we can arrange like structurize the components whenever we are developing. Okay, so that whenever we are migrating to something new, it will be easy for us. Okay, so if you'll see this same scenario, like changing the package names, nowadays like a lot of AI tools plugins are there, right? So you can directly integrate some AI plugin in IntelliJ, and you can just run one command like all change all the package declaration to Jakarta, right? So that makes sense. And another like instance is like if you remember earlier in security configuration, we used to use web security configure adapter, right? But they suddenly removed it, and like they made it deprecated, and now they have introduced like earlier only they have introduced security filter chain. So in that point of time also, like if we are like structurizing our components well, then it will be easy to migrate. So yeah, that.
Thank you.
Any other questions we have? Okay. Okay. There is one question. So from chat, like the question goes like, how do you create your own annotation in Spring Boot? Anyone?
To create custom annotation, as far as my knowledge goes, it's we use the at interface annotation, and that using that you can define that this is a custom annotation that you're trying to create, and inside the block you can further have variable statements or other instantiations that you want, and define what that annotation is supposed to do or supposed to work as. So at interface followed by the name of the annotation.
So yeah, I guess we have one more question from same guy. Are you using GraalVM in production? Yes, we are using GraalVM in production, but we are using the most bare minimum things that we're doing, right? Like as he suggested, going into the instruction specification of GraalVM is something that we are still migrating on. But yeah, in the initial base transition of GraalVM is currently started, right? And also, when you say mutation, is it like a interface in Java? Uh, Not exactly, right? So it is more of a convention that we use in GraphQL, right? So this is more of like you're using your REST convention, right? Now you have your get, post, put, delete, right? So which each and every particular keyword says something about it, right? Like now HTTP get means that you're getting some data from the server, right? Post is basically you're creating some data object. Put is you're updating something, and delete again you're deleting something. So mutation is a convention over there, right? So mutation just say that if you're modifying any data, that can be creation, it can be deletion, or it can be updation, right? Any mutable operation that you're doing onto any data layer, so that is when we use a mutation, right? And whenever we want to basically go ahead and just get some data, that is when we use query. It is very similar to your SQL system, right? Like you do select when you want to get some data, you do insert and update commands when you want to mutate some data, right? So this is very similar to that itself. Right? So probably, hopefully, that answered your question. So, yeah, I guess that's it from the online side as well.
Yeah. Hello.
Oh,
Yeah. So my question is regarding value objects. So when do we in general like take a decision on taking like choosing value object or using value object? Like does it depend on the validations or how many validation can a value object can have?
Yes. So primarily, yes, validations, or even if you are trying to have a lot of, so let's say some we are trying like phone number, for example, or any such situation where you're having you're supposed to do encapsulation of multiple classes. So that is when you'll primarily go for value objects, and you don't really want to have the reference of the object every time. You don't want to create the object every time. So that's when you go for value object.
Okay. So in case maybe a phone number like can have multiple validation, maybe 10 digits.
You'll have multiple objects, you'll have multiple instantiations, but then
Okay.
I will not have to do a check every time. I don't have to. It is also fail safe design pattern, so you don't really whatever modifications you're supposed to do, you'll do it in the same class. If you're having any exceptions, it will happen during instantiation. So that's why value objects.
Okay.
Any other questions? We have time to take up at least one or two questions more, right? Okay, cool. And if there are no questions, probably then we'll wind up the discussion, right? So thank you all for coming in. Right. So there are a bit of refreshments available over here. So we can basically break out and be done for the day. Right. Thank you all guys for coming out. Right.